Okay, welcome to our third common session of Sunoikis Digital Classics 2016. Today we have the second part of Introduction to Treebanking. Last week Giuseppe Celano and Doug Hogg presented Treebanking, and today we have Giuseppe, who will talk again about Treebanking and also about the assignments. So Giuseppe, welcome.
Giuseppe,
you have to unmute.
Yes.
Okay.
So now you should be able to hear me. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Monica. And today we wanted to continue to talk about Treebanking. But before doing this, I would like to say something about XML, because last time there were students asking about what XML is. I show the XML for our Treebank data, and then there was a question about what XML is. So I will try to just say something in order to for you to get at least a vague idea of what I was talking about. XML is a kind of a language, extensible markup language, to be more precise, and it is simply a language allowing us to distinguish between data and metadata, basically. So here on the slide, you can see that we have some text starting from metellus, the word metellus, and ending with desertis period. So this is an example of a text. And usually what we want to do, especially what humanists want to do, is to be able to distinguish between the actual data, what we acknowledge to be the data, and any kind of comment we can add to our data. For example, in this case, the markup simply or mostly concerns the structure of the text. We understand from this XML fragment, which by the way might also be a well-formed XML text. We understand that this is a paragraph. We understand this because we have this what we call opening tag. Within square brackets, we find a name, in this case a P, okay, standing for paragraph. This is the meaning that we usually associate to this kind of opening tag. And then we have a matching closing tag, which is very similar to the opening one, but it also has a slash, meaning, okay, so this is the end for this element. And within the P element, we find our text. So we understand that this is simply a paragraph. If we look closer to this at this fragment, we can even see that we added that another piece of information was added. To be more precisely, we added information that this is a text part. So this is a portion of a text. And more precisely, this is the section number 2 of a work. We are not really now interested in mentioning this work, but the point is that the markup is really very clear and describes basically the text. And finally, this part of the text is also important because we can see that we also find an element, the add element, which is used here to say that the D between the opening and the closing and tags has been basically added. Okay, so probably it was not part of the text, but it was added. So this is why we find here, I'd say, a very clear example of how we can distinguish in XML between the data and the metadata. Okay. And jumping again to our Treebanking file, I think that maybe now we can understand that it represents not only it contains not only the text, the actual text that we wanted to tree-bank, what I call the data, but also contains a lot of other information describing the text itself. In this case, we are not really interested in the we are basically interested in describing the morphosyntax of the text. And again, if we just focus on the first word, we decided, because this is just a matter of decision, we decided to put the form of a word, which is the actual text we are trying to tree-bank, within the form attribute. Okay, attribute is a technical term. And then we added a number of other attributes, lemma, post tag, relation, and head, in order to describe this this word. Okay, so we added that this is the lemma. Okay, we added what the lemma is for this word, and then the we added the morphological information, and finally the syntactic function of this word with respect to word number with ID number 10, which is the head, which is the governor of this word. So again, it's not really important that you now understand everything, but it is important at least to stress that you should always go to the actual data, understand how the data have been encoded, even when you might use, as we usually do when we tree-bank, even when we use a nice graphical interface in order to perform our task, which is again in this case providing a text with morphosyntactic annotation. That said, I would like now to go on with tree-banking. So going on with tree-banking the sentences, the passage I started to tree-bank last time, because during this second meeting on tree-banking, I would simply like to show how you can tree-bank, what you should do, rather than trying to detail everything with definitions. I think that this might be a better approach, especially if you are a beginner. So let's get back to this sentence that I started to tree-bank during the last common session. As I said, the first thing that you need to do when you try to tree-bank is try to understand the meaning of a sentence. Sometimes your idea may not be extremely clear, okay, but at least you need to have some idea of the meaning, because this is what helps you in building the tree. As I said, in this case, the meaning of this sentence is pretty clear. So the one who strives for, okay, alienum, for someone else's possession, loses proprium, his own possession, deservedly. This is an adverb. So as I said, the first thing you should do is try to identify the main verb in a sentence. And why? The answer is clear, because usually the main verb of a sentence determines the structure of the sentence, of the other components, of the other constituents of the sentence to a large extent. For example, if I read amitto, okay, amittit, meaning again loses, I would expect to find a subject, the person, right, who loses something, but at the same time, I also expect to find the object. So because someone loses something, so I would expect to find a nominative and an accusative at least. So this is what I mean when I say that the verb determines the structure of a sentence to a large extent. Of course, there are also other constituents here, but at least which are not really cannot be really predicted by the fact that we have this specific verb. For example, merito, we can find it with many other verbs, but at least I repeat, the subject and the object are required, because we have a verb, amitto, requiring these cases.
Giuseppe, please, can you unmute yourself, because you are muted now. Giuseppe?
Okay, yes.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry for that. Sometimes
no.
It's the mouse. Okay, I was saying. So what about the subject for this sentence? We are not really very lucky here, because we don't have a simple noun, but we have an entire clause. So the one who strives for someone else's possession. So this is what counts as the subject for this sentence. And here we have a problem, because how can we annotate that the subject is an entire clause here? We have an entire clause functioning as the subject, but according to our formalism, we cannot, and this is important to stress, we cannot select, for example, more than one word and attach a label directly to this group of words. We simply, the only thing that we can do is to choose one word, so we go word by word, and we attach any single word to another word. This is part of the formalism, okay? Any formalism has advantages and disadvantages. This should be known, and if you work within a dependency grammar formalism, as we do, in this case we have to accept this rule. And so, how we can solve this problem? What we do again is taking the verb of the relative clause. In this case, we have a relative clause here, and we attach it to the verb. Okay, so this is why the verb is here attached to amitted. Then we go on and we take the subjects of the verb of the relative clause, and we attach it to the verb itself, and then again we go on with the object here, and similarly we attach it to the verb, and we assign, of course, a different syntactic label. This is alienum is the object, so this is why I go here, right, and I select the right label, in this case the object. So what we have here, what we are saying here basically is that the relative clause function as the subject with respect to amitto, but we had to assign the label subject to just one word within the relative clause. And we did that because this is, again, I repeat, this is the formalism. We cannot do elsewhere. We need to choose a word. And our choice was the verb of the relative clause. Again, why? Because I started saying that the verb, a finite form verb, determines the structure of a sentence or of a clause, and so it plays a kind of central role within a sentence or within a clause. So this is why we decided that the verb of the relative clause should get the subject label. Okay. So I think that most of the annotation here is clear. What about the adverb merito? So we can assign the label adverbial, because here adv doesn't mean adverb. Adverb is a morphological category, while here we are talking about syntax, so this is an adverbial. If you are familiar with English grammar, you would usually use the term adjunct, okay? And basically the label means that this constituent is not really verb specific, is not specific to amitto. We can basically find is something that could also be left out of the sentence. It is not a kind of constituent which is kind of required by the verb amitto. I'm not saying, this is important to say, that merito is not important. I'm not saying this. I'm only saying that from the perspective of the structure and of the syntax, merito is not really required by amitto. Is not, or, and I'm using this kind of paraphrase as a synonym, it is not specific to amitto, while a subject and an object are specific, are cases which are specific to a certain class of verbs. Let's go on now with a more complex sentence, which has been partly annotated by me, but I wanted to show you each step because it is important to again to understand when we try to annotate a more complex, a longer sentence, a lot of problems may arise. For example, in this case, I will try again to translate the sentence because it is always important to understand the meaning. A dog whom, while he was bringing Carmen meat through a river, per fluvium, swimming, sorry for the translation, of course this is not good English, but it's important to have to start with a literal translation. So swimming, this is the dog who is swimming, the dog saw his image his image in the mirror, in speculo lympharum of the water. And Putans, thinking that another prey, fairy, was brought by another, probably another animal or another dog, this is not specified, eripere voluit. He wanted to take, to grab, of course, the prey. So this is a very literal translation for this sentence. What should we do at this point? How can we tree bank this sentence? Again, let's focus on the verbs of the main clause. Here we have the problem that we don't simply have a single main clause, but we have a coordination, right? Because we have vidit and voluit and wanted. So this is the first problem. How can we annotate coordination according to our formalism? The way that we decided to annotate coordination is the one that you can see here. We take the coordinator, we assign the label core to it, and then we attach the two conjuncts. In this case, we have two verbs, and they get the labels they need to have according to their function. In this case, we are speaking of two predicates, and we also assign the suffix co, which means coordinated. Okay, this is a coordination. You can find, if you click on a verb, you can find the suffix here, right? So if you click here, you can see the usual list of syntactic labels, and then you can add a suffix here. Okay, if I wanted to erase the suffix, I simply select this hyphen, but if I wanted to specify that this is a conjunct, okay, I need to add the co suffix. So once I annotate the two verbs this way, I can of course go on with the structure related to each verb. For example, vidit, I translated saw, the dog saw his image. Okay, so image is again the object. Sum is simply an attribute, and we attach it to simulacrum because it is his image, right? And then I attach in the mirror of the water to vidit. How can I do that? We decided to put the preposition first, attach the preposition to the verb, and then attach speculo to the preposition. Preposition gets the label aux p. P stands for preposition. Preposition is what we call in linguistics a function word, while speculo is a content word. Okay, and then we attach lympharum to speculo. So in the mirror of the water. Okay. Similarly, we can go on with other constituents. If we focus for a moment on the other coordinated clause here, you can see that voluit is the verb of this coordinated clause. Then we have eripere. He wanted to take. So this functions as an object with respect to voluit, and then we have a putans that I translated with while thinking, or because he thought. So basically this stands for a circumstantial clause, we would say, using a traditional terminology for Latin grammar. And so this is why we attach the verb to voluit, putans to voluit, and we assign the label again adverbial, because the function is not exactly as the one that Merito had in the previous sentence, but is similar. Is similar in the sense that this kind of constituent, or this kind of specification, is not really required by the verb voluit or eripere. It can be left out. It adds something, of course, but it is not really required by the structure of the verb. But of course, if I just look at voluit, again, I expect that a subject is somewhere, and I also expect to find an object, because I wanna to know what in this case, the dog wants to do, right? Then I can go on. How can I, for example, annotate the clause, the content of what the dog was thinking? Okay, this other clause. Well, again, what we did is to take the verb of the clause and attach directly to the verb putans here. Then we take the subject of the verb ferri, and we go on this way. Again, there is a clear parallelism here with what I have been saying so far. Why? Because again, ferri, I translated, let me repeat, I translated this passage with thinking that another prey was brought by another animal or another dog, right? So this is a clause. We acknowledge that this is a clause, and this is why, again, I took the verb of the clause, and we assign to the verb, which is again that constituent determine the structure of the rest of the clause. We assign to it the function which actually belongs to the entire clause. That is the function of the object function, right? I think something, okay, so if I say that I think that another prey was brought by another one, this entire clause functions as the objects with respect to putans. But since, again, I cannot take all the words together and apply the labels opt to them all together, because I repeat, this is because this is not allowed by the formalism, I choose the verb as the word to which I can assign this label. The other one are pretty predictable, I think. Predam will be the subject, right? Aliam is again attributes. Ab will be a preposition, okay, and we could take this as an object. Why object? To tell the truth, there is much discussion about this kind of a complementation. What you should understand is that we interpret, so this is another, I would say, another major difficulty that you can encounter when you tree bank, because this is one of the most difficult concepts to understand at first if you are a beginner. The problem is that we use the term objects not really only for accusatives, okay, for direct object, not only for direct object, but we also use it to mark any constituent which is considered to be, again, verb specific, which is required by a verb. Let me give this clear example. If I say I went to, I don't know, to London, for example, here the verb went is expected to be followed by the location, right, where I go. And this is why I say that London is kind of required by the verb go. This is what we call an argument. It is an argument of the verb go, and this is what we label as object. Unfortunately, in linguistics, sometimes you use different labels for the same or very similar concepts. We here decided to follow the terminology developed at Prague, and they decided to basically use this term in order to mean argument, or to be more precise, this was a further development, to be more precise, of the Latin dependency tree bank, because in the Prague dependency tree bank, things are a little bit different. But so what is important here to state is that we basically use the label object to mean argument, to mean we attach, we use this label if we encounter a constituent which is taken to be required by a specific verb. Right. So again, let's go on here. What about this clause, while he was bringing some meat through a river? What we do is, so a question, an interesting question might be, what's the scope of this clause? I mean, what this clause really modify, or to be to keep things even simpler. This clause modifies simply vidit or also voluit. This is an important question, because on the basis of your answer, we could end up with different annotation. For example, I would take that this clause basically relates to both the coordinated verbs here, to both vidit and voluit, okay? And this is why I start my annotation of the clause putting the subordinator, attaching the subordinator to que. What does this mean? This simply means that I take this entire clause, okay, affecting to relate to both the conjuncts here, to both vidit and voluit. But if I thought, for example, that this clause relates only to vidit, then I should do something like that. I should put the subordinator on vidit, and then I could go on with my annotation this way. Okay, so while he was bringing meat through a river. So if I, again I repeat, if I take this clause to modify only VDIT, I attach it to VDIT, but if I think that it relates to both clauses, in this case we attach it to que. This is a kind of technique, this is an example, this is a good example of what we call technical annotation, because of course if you for a second reflects on this kind of relationship between cum and que, it is clear that linguistically there is no really any connection between the subordinator cum and the coordinator que. But this is the way, the problem here is that this is the way we annotate a subordinate conjunction in order to mean, okay, look, here the subordinate clause modifies both the verbs, not just the first one. And what about the labels here? Of course, we have aux C. Okay, C stands for conjunction. This is a subordinating conjunction. Then we, what about ferret? Again, ferret is the verb of the subordinate clause, and we assign to the verb the function that we think the entire subordinate clause has with respect to its superordinate clause or superordinate clauses. Again, since we are talking about a circumstantial clause, while he was bringing, so this is a temporal clause, I would say. This is again an adverbial, right? An adverbial clause. Again, it is a kind of a clause which is not really specific to VDIT or to voluit. I can use a temporal clause with any kind of a verb, right? So this is what I mean when I say that it is not verb specific. And this is why ferret gets the adverbial label. And then again, what about carnem? Carnem is object, right? What about per? Per is a preposition again. And again, what about fluvium? It is again an adverbial, right? This is an adverbial modification because I don't need to. I mean, saying that the meat was brought through the river. This kind of modification is not again really required by the verb ferret here. And finally, we have the problem about canis. So what about canis? This is interesting because according, I would say that I take canis to both the subjects of a VDIT, but at the same time, the subject of voluit is co-referential with that of VDIT. I mean, we are basically talking of the canis, so it is always the canis, the one who saw and wanted, right? So in our formalism, this is not the only possible way that we can annotate this phenomenon, but what we decided to do, again, this is a matter of choice, is to take canis and again attach it to que. What does this mean? Again, of course, it's not that canis is the subject of the coordination, right? But this simply means this kind of, again, technical annotation means that we take canis to be the subject for VDIT and also voluit. It relates to both verbs. As I was saying, I could say a lot about this kind of annotation because there may be different ways to analyze, to describe, and also to interpret this phenomenon. But for now, I repeat, take this as a rule that we are using, and knowing that this is that not any kind of annotation should be taken as a strong theoretical linguistic claim. Some kind of note, some kind of annotation is really I would say clear and unquestionable, but for other kinds of annotations, such as how to annotate coordination here, so in these cases, there might be different solutions. So, but we need to choose one of these and stick to them. Okay, right now, before I go on, I wanted to show you an interesting tool allowing comparison between trees. So I asked you to send me the links of your work, of your annotated text, the one that I gave as an exercise in the wiki. And so we had two students who made their homework, and now I wanted to show that it is possible to automatically compare their annotation and really get a lot of interesting comments and reflections about their work and more in general about grammar. For example, so this is the website. I simply type here the identifier for the annotation. Each annotation in Arethusa is identified by a URL, and at the end of the URL we have a number which is specific, which is unique for each annotation. So I need those numbers, and of course this is something that every one of you can do because everything is online, is totally open. Once you have these two numbers, you can type them here and click on submit, and what you get is a comparison between the annotation of the first annotator and the annotation of the second annotator, and more precisely you find underlined, highlighted in this case, highlighted those words which have been annotated in a different way. We have a number of values because, of course, you can compare two texts on different levels. For example, if we look at the morphology, I have not talked about morphology really, not because, to tell the truth, morphological annotation is not complex. It can be very complex, but because I thought it was more important to focus on the syntactic annotation, which usually is more problematic. But here, what's interesting is that you get a comparison. For example, I can immediately see that this adjective has been annotated in a different ways. The first annotator annotated it as a neuter, nominative neuter. You know, the distinction here is only concerns only this letter, which means, okay, this is something that I'm telling you, we have a documentation for this, but this means that the first annotator took this as a neuter, but the second one took this adjective as a feminine adjective, and of course this is the right annotation. But again, the tools allows you to compare and immediately see that there is basically a mistake in the first annotation, and then you can simply go through all the pairs. Here, simply when you see that a value is missing, of course, this simply means that there is a difference because the first annotator didn't annotate anything. And what is very interesting is that you can also get a number about telling in this case, the percentage of agreement, so 0.6. Well, it's not really extremely bad, especially if you don't know Latin very well, or you are an absolute beginner. So it's not really a bad result, but of course we need higher values if we wanted to incorporate this text, for example, into a corpus. Okay, I'm not saying anything about this other value, which is a coefficient, which is a number which takes into consideration also the fact that there might be some agreement by chance, right? So this is a little bit more complex. I'm not going anything about this right now, but in general, you should take these numbers as showing, as saying something about how much the two, to what extent the two annotations are the same, agree. Okay, so if we go on, we can see, for example, that there are differences also concerning the way the tree has been built. What is also interesting is that if I click, for example, on the word, on this word, I see I can directly have access to the tree which has been annotated by the first annotator. And I see that he decided, so this is the sentence. Let me translate it again so that you can follow the entire line of my reasoning. So the logic of the benefits is simple. Okay, so this annotator decided to attach the beneficiorum to est, but the second one, again, I clicked on it, attached the beneficiorum to ratio, right? So again, here we have a difference. This, of course, gives you a lot of room for discussing these kinds of variants or errors with your students. So this kind of work, as you can understand, it is also extremely interesting to immediately captures how well your students fare when it comes to build a linguistic tree, and it is also clear that the way a tree is a tree banked says much about the understanding of a sentence. So, for example, I would say that this is the kind of annotation that I would do. The logic of the benefits is simple. So this is the right annotation. So the other annotator had some problems, and again, this can be immediately solved if you compare the two annotations. Again, let's go on. Of course, I don't have time here to go through all the differences here. But what I can do is, for example, to focus on to say something about the annotation. The annotation for the following sentences, because this is an interesting passage. For example, what about tantum erogatur? In my opinion, for example, the translation for this sentence would be simply the best. So according to my translation, the subject is implied, and it is the benefit. Simply, the benefit is offered, is given. As we will understand that the point here is that what the author wants to say is that benefits are given, and you should not expect anything from the person you gave, you offered your benefit. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a benefit anymore. Okay, it wouldn't be something liberal. So what this sentence says is, again, the benefit is simply, benefaction is simply given. Okay. So, according to my interpretation, tantum is an adverb here, is not really the subject. But I understand, because I know that in some English translations, they translate this sentence as so much is paid out. Okay, so according to, for example, the English translation, tantum might be the subject of erogatur. So here we have this, luckily for us, is not really affecting the meaning of the general meaning of the sentence, because of whether we accept my translation and my analysis or the other one. So basically the meaning is the same, but still we have a difference, and we should be aware of that, because it might be, and these kinds of passages exist, it might be that sometimes a difference like this directly affects the meaning of the sentence, the general meaning of the sentence. Again, as you can see, it's just a Treebanking that we had the possibility to focus on this problem. Let's go on with another, in my opinion, a good example. So here we have another sentence. The translation is, again, according to my interpretation, is if the benefit is implied, gives something back, this is gain, comma, if it doesn't give anything back, this is not loss. Okay, so this is exactly what the benefaction is. You should not expect necessarily anything back from the person you are giving something. So what is interesting here, and maybe let me also show what the second annotator did. Wait a second, what the first one did is that, yeah, this is what I wanted to show. Here if we for a second focus only on this branch, here there is of course a problem, as you can see, because C refers is related to, so this is a conditional clause, but the C cannot really, is not really governed by C, but I would say that this is the other way around, because this is, again, we have here a coordination in a syndeton, right? We have two main clauses, and then we have simply a comma without a coordinator. And so, but this is the main clause here, and then we have a conditional clause here. Of course, this is, I would say, not really the subject, because according to my interpretation, this is lucrum. Again, I repeat the translation. If the benefit gives anything, aliquid, back, this is lucrum. Okay, this is gain. Okay, so I would take lucrum as a pinom rather than the subject here. And so C is rightly annotated as a subordinated conjunction. And what about redded? Again, redded is an adverbial because this is a subordinate clause, and I am annotating the function of this subordinate clause with respect to its superordinate clause, in this case, S lucrum, right? And what is really interesting here to me is the function of aliquid, because the annotator took aliquid to be the subject. I don't agree. I don't agree, but maybe because I read some, again, some English translations out there, and this conditional clause is usually translated as if anything comes back. If anything comes back, this is gain, comma, otherwise, blah, blah, blah. So the problem here, in my opinion, is that we should focus on the verb redded here, which in Latin really means gives back. Okay, so this is a transitive verb, so I usually expect a subject and objects. And so, of course, I can also translate the entire clause if anything comes back. So this is, I would call it a kind of free, not really literal translation for this clause, and this is totally fine. But the point here is that when you tree bank, I can immediately identify the problems, and if you have understood the real meaning and function of each word. Again, according to my interpretation, but I'm open to hear, of course, your ideas and your comments here. I would take aliquid to be the object and not the subject of this conditional clause. And again, what about the other constituents? I see we can, so the structure is very is similar. I mean, this goes here. Redded is again an adverbial. This is okay, known. This is I won't say anything right now about this kind of annotation of known. This is basically a label, meaning that known is taken to be a kind of emphasizing word with respect to the verb. And how can I join these two branches? Well, as I so if we again try to use your brain, I'd say, and guess a possible solution. Well, when we have an explicit coordinator, we take the coordinator. Do you remember que? And then we attach the two verbs, the two conjuncts to the coordinator, right? But in this case, we don't have the coordinator, but we could take the comma here to function as a coordinator. We don't have one explicit here, but we can use the comma with this function. So we could end up with this structure where the comma here has the function of a coordinator, okay? Again, I'm not logged in, so this is why I get that red message, but don't worry. So this is, I'm not here talking about the annotation of the commas. This is not really very important right now. I wanted you to focus on the main points of annotation. And this is basically, oh, of course, a damnum is a pinom here again. And this is the translation for this. This is the the linguistic tree, the syntactic tree for this this sentence. And again, so really very briefly, because I don't have really much time left at this point. But what about this sentence? Ego illud Devi ut darem. I gave illud, the benefit, the benefaction, ut darem, for the sake of giving, okay, and the linguistic tree, I think here is a very simple to build. The only problem here is that you need to put ut is the, again, is a subordinated conjunction, and darem is again has the function. This is a final clause, right? This is a final clause, and again, final clause are not really verb specific. I can use a final clause with virtually all the verbs, or at least many other verbs. So it is not verb specific, and this is why, again, this clause gets the label adverbial. And here, again, we have the entire linguistic tree for this clause. So let me some final comments. As you can see, there is much logic in tree banking. And I hope you appreciated the fact that when you start tree banking, you are required to reflect on the function of each word, and sometimes this helps you to understand the meaning of a sentence much better. Again, sometimes mistakes of this kind cannot really affect the general meaning, and this is why, let me say, sometimes people can perfectly translate something even if he or she has not really understood everything about the morphosyntactic analysis of a sentence. But the point is, sometimes these kind of distinctions really affect the interpretation that you can give to a sentence. And so again, the point here is that we should learn to really pay attention to the function, to the structure of each component, to each constituent in a sentence, because this can really help us to go into the details of a sentence and really fully understand it. Okay, I would say that this is what I wanted to show. There is a lot that can be said about the particular labels and some other kinds of annotation for some particular notes, but the point here is simply to get you interested. I hope you could understand a little bit more about tree banking, and I'm open to questions. So Monica, is it okay?
Yes, Giuseppe, thank you very much for this very detailed analysis of the sentences. I think that here you can see not only how to annotate sentences, but also how to evaluate.
Yeah.
This is very important, I think.
Yeah.
This is one of the goals of Sunoikis, to understand how to use the tools, but also how to evaluate. So, questions.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, Gabby, please.
Yeah.
You have to unmute, please unmute yourself, because I can't.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Giuseppe. That was really useful. Can I ask a very simple question? I think this is on behalf of my students this week when we were working through this. This is a question that's primarily about Arethusa, I think, rather than about the rules of dependency tree banking. But as far as we can see, when you paste a passage of text into Arethusa, it breaks it up into sentences for you.
Yes.
And it seems to do so based on punctuation, which may be arbitrary and may be not the most useful.
Yeah.
We may disagree with that.
Yeah.
It may also do the same thing with breaking up words. So there was the example you had where you split que from the word that it was connected to. and things like that. Can we go into the XML and edit that while we're tree banking, or do we have to do that before we upload the text?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. So, for example, I'm here. I think can you see my board here in Pursuits?
Yes.
So right. So basically, if you click on Edit XML here and you click on it, you basically have access to a very simple editor, right, where you can directly modify your XML. This is another reason why it is very important to understand how XML works and how I can modify. Because, for example, if I have a problem with tokenization, I probably need to add or delete a word element here, I don't know, and then so the actually the ID number is automatically changed. So if I delete a word, for example, and then I save here the document, so automatically the ID number are changed, so that there is no problem. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but definitely you can edit your XML. You can make your modifications, and then you click on save. In this case, I didn't save anything, and it says it's not permitted, probably because I did. Probably there is I made some errors here. Let me see. Okay, so if I don't know, if I change, for example, here, instead of simplex, I don't know, I put bona, something like that, and I save, it usually, I don't know why it is not permitted right now, but it should, wait a second, yeah.
Is this because you're changing somebody else's annotation?
I know it should be because this is my board, so this is my file. Wait a second, because probably okay, but here okay. Wait a second. So if I change it, let me try to change this, and I just put bene, I don't know, and I save. Right. Now it has been saved. If I go to edit right now, you can see that. Can you see that the word has been changed? Bene here. I just put this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that if you change within the XML, if you change the values, of course, you basically works with the values of the attributes. You can change the form here, or the lemma, for example, or even the relation. Then these changes are gonna affect the way you display, how the sentence is displayed in Arethusa then. Okay, so this is basically a way to, if there are usually major changes, you can directly work on the XML, and this is what I suggest.
Great, thanks very much. I noticed I jumped over. There was a question from Natia, which I jumped in front of. I apologize for that.
Okay. So first, I can read the sum. Can I read first of all, thank you. I'm reading. Natia, I think.
Yes, in the chat. But
you also have a question. Will be this kind of universal Treebanking and morphosyntactic annotation suitable for Caucasian languages, for example, for Georgian? Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is in the sense that the so Arethusa and Persuades in general are open to any language, basically. You can. The only thing that you need to come up with are the right tag sets. If you have, I mean, the set of labels, for example, and also the morphological analysis, of course, needs to be adapted. Is a language specific to a large extent. So the only thing that we need is to have the right labels that we can associate to the nodes, and then that's it. But basically, you can work. You can do this kind of work with any language. So Anise says, Giuseppe, I noticed that the title Agataka Ikaka received XD tag. Could you say about other uses besides evocative and exclamative elements? Okay, I don't know what kind of which kind of sentence you are referring to. Probably the one. Wait a second. Anisa, I don't know which kind of sentence you are referring to because we are dealing with Latin right now, and in the example there is no agataka ikaka, but I can say in general that the XD tag is used is basically yes used for so the general function is that you use XD when you have something, when you have a constituent which you think does not belong to the sentence, is extra clausal, okay, or extra sentential, and this is exactly the case for vocatives or sometimes some exclamations. So this is a very, I know, not extremely precise definition, but this is what we use right now. And I don't know, Monica, if we have other questions, because I can only see...
I don't think so. I'm looking, but no. And of course, for those who are in the Hangout, you can unmute yourself and directly ask questions. No, I don't see other questions.
Okay.
And now is 6:12, so I think we can, yeah, it's... so really, thank you, because I think that in these two common sessions we had the time to see Treebanking. Of course, it's very complex, but we have the tools for annotating. We have guidelines, and in the wiki, you know, you have the class outlines also with readings. So if you're interested in Treebanking as in other topics of Sunoikisis, you have the material.
Yeah.
And for yes. So, and thank you, Giuseppe. Really, it was great. I also thank again Doug for last week. And next week we have a different topic, name entity recognition, with Gabby, who is online today, and Chiara Palladino. I wanted to apologize for last week's, because when I schedule a Hangout on air, I get two links, one for YouTube, so that you can follow on YouTube, and another one for the Hangout. But when I start the Hangout, then you can't join the Hangout through that link. I didn't know that, and I couldn't see that because I host the Hangout. So every week, basically, I schedule the Hangout. You get a link to the event page, but then I will have to send you again a link for the actual Hangout, so that if you want to participate in the discussion, you can join the Hangout. So please, but I post the link 10 minutes before the common session online. So
Monica,
yes.
Let me simply add that if any one of you is interested in Treebanking something or needs some kind of explanation for the comparison, I'm totally available to say more about that. And we are actually looking for people Treebanking. So yeah, this is also an invitation. Even if, as you saw, this is a kind of a serious work, so you need to be motivated. So this is important. But that would be great to have people doing this kind of work. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we need data, and we need people to produce this data and to learn how to evaluate data. So this is also teachers, instructors have to be motivated, but we have a lot of people for this. And yes, Anisa, yes, thank you. You will work. I know that you are very interested in Treebanking, and yes, when you start the semester. And Gabby, now that you are teaching, so you see that you have students, and so yeah, excellent. Thank you. So. Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about that, but it's a slightly more involved question. So maybe we're out of time and we should talk offline. but
well, it's 6:15, but I think that if it's just for
well, let me ask the question, and if you think you can answer it quickly, we can talk about it now. If not, we can take it offline. But my question is basically if a student or if a group of students wanted to do an assessed project which involved tree banking, presumably in order to get a decent project that was involved enough to assess, they would want to tree bank a bit of a passage of text and then do something with that, do some research with the results of their tree banking. So do some querying across it, or something along those lines. So the examples we've seen of querying on tree banking have all been on existing online tree banks, not on your own little corpus that you've made. So if someone were to tree bank 20 or 50 sentences and then wanted to query their own sentences, what's the best way to do so? Would it be to get them approved and put into Perseus and then query them there, or would there be some other way for them to do that?
Okay, so right now the queries that that showed and the ones that you in general can perform online are on corpora which have been uploaded and usually are not the kinds of annotations that the student does with, for example, Arethusa, because in that case they should be, I repeat, uploaded in those repositories. But there we only have corpora that have been cleaned and corrected. So if you are looking for something quick, what I do, but I know this is something that I do, I simply query the tree banks. So you need basically some programming skills. What I can tell you, if you need something in this respect, I can also help. It's not really very a big problem for me. In the sense that if you have some queries that you would like to perform on those data, I can help with that. But currently, as far as I know, at least in Perseus and in Arethusa, we basically cannot support querying the data that you create and you see online. So that's unfortunately the question. But again, in general, if you are interested, this should be. If they wanted to tree bank, the fact that there is currently there is no infrastructure which allow them to immediately queries should not be an obstacle, because I could help them with this. So. I know this is the situation right now, as far as I know. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you both confirmed that there's no simple infrastructural way to do that, and you very kindly offered to support that. Obviously, ideally, if the person teaching the class were an expert on this sort of thing, then I would be able to support my students doing it. But I don't know any more about this than they do at the moment. So so your offer of help is extremely generous.
Yeah.
If any of my students were to be interested in taking this as their assessed work, which I don't know yet whether they would, but if they do, we will certainly take you up on it.
At least they could. The tool comparing the two annotation can give at least a sense of how well they are doing, and if they get interested and they want to also they want to simply to tree bank a passage, you don't really need to tree bank an entire book. You can start with just a few sentences, and then if you wanted to query them, I can help them definitely, because I'm really interested in seeing people using tree banking and query tree banks. So I would really do that gladly. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for this rich common session full of analysis and questions. So thank you all for the work. Thank you, Giuseppe, and thank you to the students who have tried to annotate the sentences have used the tools, so really thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, and see you next week with another great common session. See you.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. Bye to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, bye.